And we're going to talk about why do people think China stole American jobs. There is so much to unpack here. So first, we're going to start with the idea of American jobs. What is an American job, right? So an American job, the idea of an American job essentially says that there are certain jobs, there are certain types of work that belong to us in the United States, right? That are meant to be done here. And typically, by the way, this notion is typically reserved for, jobs that were originally created here, or jobs that are created by companies that are based here, right? But this idea of American jobs, for the most part, is a farce. Now, I say for the most part because small businesses, little, mom and pop shops, and smaller firms that kind of only deal with domestic clients, yeah, though they would create American jobs because there's really no, rationale for those jobs being anywhere else, right? So you could call those American jobs. But for the most part, we're talking about large multinational corporations who just create jobs wherever they want to, right? So the idea of American jobs is kind of a farce because these companies, for the most part, are not really American. Sure, they may have their headquarters in Delaware, which, by the way, is just an international tax haven. As much as people from Delaware might disagree with that, it's true. Might not like that. It's true. But these nations don't belong to any country. Thus, the jobs that they create don't belong to any country, right? The DNA of a corporation tells it to do one thing: make more money, stay in business, keep your shareholders happy, keep your board of directors happy, right? So in order for them to do that, they have to reduce costs and make more money. The best way to make more money in the short term is to reduce costs. So how do you do that? So originally, there used to be laws about where these companies could set up shop. Now, over the years, these companies have realized that it is more expensive to pay someone in dollars than it is to, say, pay someone in yuan or to pay someone in, other nations' currencies. So they lobbied the government to say, hey, what if you made these agreements where we didn't have to pay tariffs or taxes or anything to bring our goods back into America, right? We just, we'll put the labor overseas and we'll bring and we'll have the goods shipped back over here. But that could be expensive for us. So what if you created what are called free trade agreements, where there's very little cost for us to move our production all around the world to where it's cheapest for us, and then anything else that and then we can sell our goods for similar prices in the U.S. and make tons of money. So there are lots of trade agreements that I could mention, but the most important one for this discussion is called PNTR, which stands for Permanent Normal Trade Relations, and this specifically was with China. Bernie Sanders has a great speech about why he was against this. I suggest you check it out. But essentially, the idea here was that corporations, you can put your jobs wherever you want them, and then you'll just send goods back to America to be sold, and there's no punishment for that, right? There's no reason why you shouldn't do that, because these free trade agreements lowered the bar of entry. It removed regulations saying that certain percentage of things had to be made in the United States, or it might say that a tariff doesn't have to be enforced because it falls under this agreement or what have you. So the idea that so I've explained now that the idea of American jobs is kind of silly, but also the idea of American companies is kind of silly for the most part, right? Because the truth is these companies exist all over the world. They're not bound to any particular area. Even where their headquarters are doesn't matter so much. Many of these companies have, multiple subsidiaries that act as separate organizations that they then put headquarters in other places, and it gets very complicated, right? So let's get back to the first half of the question, which is why do people think China stole these American jobs, right? So one of the reasons Americans think that is because that's what the media tells them. But the truth is, like I mentioned earlier with my discussion of PNTR, is that China didn't steal these jobs at all. What happened was corporations realized that they could pay less, that they could spend less money on labor costs if they took the labor outside of the US. Now, in this case, most of it went to China. So what ended up happening was that these corporations closed down factories in the US because it was just, in their opinion, it was too expensive to pay, and they had gotten essentially a freebie to go wherever they wanted. So they closed down expensive factories in the US, and they built those factories somewhere else. In this case, China, where they thought they could pay less money for the work that they wanted done, and then they could reap more profit, right? Because again, the foundation of these multinational corporations, of these big businesses, is please your shareholders, please the board, stay in existence, make more money. And the way that they can do that is to just cut costs, right? And as I explained earlier. So some Americans saw their jobs be closed down where they were working, and similar jobs opened up overseas. So it looks like, from the perspective of someone who's just lost their job, well, someone else stole your job. But actually, that's not true at all. No one stole that job, partially because it didn't really belong to you or America or anything like that, but also because the capitalist class essentially got what they wanted. They bribed the government to get what they wanted, which was the freedom to put down their roots wherever they wanted them, where they could do business the cheapest. And so with that permission, they weren't going to stick around where it was more expensive for them. Are you crazy? Are they crazy? Well, they are, but for different reasons, right? But so it didn't make sense for them to stick around. So they closed down those jobs here and moved them to another country where it was cheaper for them to do business. So even though it looks like those jobs were stolen, and in this case by China, it just misunderstands the system, right? Workers have way less power. The proletarians have way less power than the capitalist class. And this discussion of so-and-so country stole my job is actually a great, or immigrants stole my job, or what have you, is a great example of that power dynamic, right? The truth is, no one stole a job. All of us, because we live in capitalist systems, sell our labor to whomever will buy it. Now, sometimes we get lucky and we enjoy that, but a lot of times we do not get lucky and we don't enjoy that, right? We're doing job because we have to. We live to work. Well, yeah, I mean, we live to work in the United States and in many other countries, unfortunately. So you get to this point where you start to blame other workers, but it doesn't make sense. Those workers are just as desperate as you are for work. They need food on their tables just as much as you do. It just so happens that the person who wants to buy their labor knows that they can buy their labor for cheaper because of the way that currencies work and other exchange rates and other such things. So all the corporation is doing is just maximizing its ability to make more money. The capitalist class is just exploiting a different group of workers. Now, in theory, it'd be nice, I guess, if they could exploit you too, so that you would have enough food to put on your table. But, you know, as I said earlier, the company doesn't care about you. The corporation and the capitalist class don't give a shit about you. The only reason they even care remotely about proletarians at all is because they cannot perform the profit engineering that they perform without proletarians. And they engage us as a class at the absolute lowest price point they can possibly find. And in this case, it had to do with shipping jobs over to other countries or China, right? But that was made possible by the government, which they bribed. By the way, the idea that many of our legislators are not part of the capitalist class themselves is, like, I don't want to talk about that right now because you get into a whole nother segment about it, and maybe I will, but the truth is a lot of these people who are governing us, who are supposed to protect us from the corporations and the capitalist class, they're capitalists too. Class solidarity, y'all, but in the wrong direction. So, to conclude, there are no American jobs, there are no American companies. China didn't steal the jobs. Capitalists simply moved them to where they could make the most profit. And they did that because our politicians let them. And our politicians let them because the corporations and the capitalists bribed them with campaign contributions to do that. Get money out of politics, people. And if you see someone who has a job when you don't have a job. Don't be mad at them. Be mad at the capitalists who are intentionally not giving you a job because they think you're not worth it.